What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. We have Alexander Volkanovski, 22 wins and 1 loss, defending his UFC Featherweight title against Brian Ortega. 15 wins, 1 loss, and 1 no contest. This fight's taking place on September the 25th at UFC 266. So this is Volkanovski's first fight since his one title defense, the rematch against Max Holloway, longtime featherweight champion, who many consider to be the greatest featherweight of all time. I personally think that the greatest featherweight of all time is still Jose Aldo, even with Max Holloway stopping Aldo twice. It's another conversation for another day, but Volkanovski has now beaten Max in back-to-back fights, although I think most would agree that Max Holloway should have been awarded the decision win in the rematch. I thought Volkanovski won the first one pretty clearly, probably 4 rounds to 1, maybe 3 to 2, but in the rematch, it was kind of tough seeing Max not get rewarded for what appeared to be a 3 rounds to 2 winning effort. But it was a split decision win for Volkanovski, who really started making a name in the UFC. You know, he had won his first few fights, but, you know, like most newcomers to the UFC, it was against lesser competition. But then when he beat Darren Elkins in July 2018, and the way that he beat Elkins he just kind of dogged him out, and Darren Elkins is a dog amongst all dogs. We recently saw him stop Derek Minner on that Sandhagen versus Dillashaw undercard in a dogfight. So the fact that Volkanovski was able to just really beat Elkins up, and, you know, Elkins did a lot of effective things as well. Volkanovski took a lot of incoming fire himself, but there was a rawness to his approach and a durability, a hardness in Volkanovski in that win over Elkins, which then landed him a shot against former 3-time title contender Chad Mendes. Chad Mendes was denied twice by Jose Aldo, the second of which was a fight of the year. This was the rematch between Aldo and Mendes in 2014, and then for the interim featherweight title against Conor McGregor in a fight where Mendes looked pretty good in the first round, kind of gassed a bit, and then McGregor kind of had him where he wanted him. Again, in the stand-up, eventually stopped him via TKO with punches. But Chad Mendes, by the time he fought Volkanovski, because Volkanovski had looked so good against Elkins and was impressive, Mendes was very long in the tooth. Volkanovski stopped him with punches in a fight where, you know, Volkanovski took a lot of punches against Mendes too, because it looked like Mendes might have even had the quicker, more explosive hands. And this was a fight where they're both shorter fighters, unlike, you know, Max Holloway in this division. Max is damn near 6 feet. Brian Ortega is about 5'9", so he's also taller for the 145 division. Volkanovski is about 5'6", as is Chad Mendes. So when they fought, they both kind of had that shorter Sean Shirk thing going. Dennis Seaver, another one, where Mendes looked like he was expending so much energy trying to enter with explosive strikes against the more composed, in the stand-up, the cooler Volkanovski, who was just showing a different level of technique and movement, where Volkanovski was controlling most of the moments, was slipping in a slick jab and was getting his combinations off. And Mendes, again, sometimes when he would explode, he was hitting Volkanovski, especially early in the fight, but Mendes was slowing down at a faster clip. One, because he was older, but also because he was having to do so much to get the punches he wanted to get off, and he was throwing them like too explosively, too hard, to where, you know, he's got his foot on the gas, where, again, Volkanovski was kind of a little bit more in cruise control, just the more efficient style of output. So Volkanovski ended up stopping Chad Mendes. But the problems that Volkanovski did have with Mendes' hand speed in that first round and his explosiveness, I don't think that Ortega has the same, you know, low center of gravity where he's coming in with the fast strikes. Different style of stand-up. But Volkanovski stopped Mendes, which then got him a fight against Jose Aldo in Aldo's, to this point, final fight at featherweight. Volkanovski beat Aldo, controlled most of the action, won via unanimous decision, and, you know, this wasn't the type of fight where Aldo looked like a championship type fighter. Volkanovski made Aldo look older than Aldo has even looked in his last couple fights, which Aldo has had a bit of a resurrection at 135. But again, Volkanovski looked great against Aldo, which then earned him the title shot against Max Holloway, where Volkanovski exceeded expectations and beat Max via unanimous decision, and then won the rematch in a very disputed decision win. So Volkanovski at this point is looking like, the most technical fighter in the division, at least in the stand-up. Max is extremely technical as well. So, no, I can't give Volkanovski the nod over Max in terms of technical abilities. But Volkanovski, let's just say, is a very sophisticated striker. He trains with City Kickboxing along with Israel Adesanya, Dan Hooker, and others out in New Zealand with Eugene Behrman. But Volkanovski's economy of movement. Now, he does have great legs in that he's able to jump in and out of the pocket, but his ability to feint, his timing on his strikes, his level changing, again, his movement when somebody's trying to advance, being able to get just out of range to then come back in range when you want to throw your stuff, but then get out of range either laterally or backing up, but backing up at an angle, just in ways where you have to have a certain level of experience and have seen this type of thing before to really know how to deal with it. Not to mention his just athletic ability. Volkanovski was a former professional rugby player, reportedly weighed over 200 pounds during much of his career. Even when he started his MMA career, he was fighting at welterweight. 170. So then he fought, for a little time there. Then he fought at lightweight 155 for some time, and has now found his championship weight class at 145, which is amazing that somebody's able to cut that amount of weight and be able to perform at such an elite level. Outstanding. But he, again, is showing the footwork, showing the timing, mixing up the kicks and the punches. Volkanovski is just looking outstanding right now. And his opponent, Brian Ortega, is coming off one of the best performances of his entire career, especially given the long layoff he had after getting just brutally destroyed by Max Holloway in a TKO doctor stoppage and after the fourth round. Like, yeah, you're not going back out there. This was in December 2018. It would be another close to 2 years before Brian Ortega would return to the cage to fight the Korean zombie Chan Sung Jung. This was October of last year. Jung was coming off a couple of great performances against Moicano, against Frankie Edgar, knocking them both out and showing a heightened sophistication in his own game. The Korean zombie used to be just that. Somebody who kind of walks forward, not the quickest or most dynamic, but, hard hitting, but willing to take shots and often taking way more than anybody should humanly take. Korean zombie used to get hit a lot more than he gets hit in recent fights. But when Korean Zombie then got in there with Ortega, a lot of people thought that Korean Zombie's advantage would be in the stand-up against Ortega because Ortega was coming off that stand-up beating, absolute beating against Max Holloway. So we're wondering, where's Ortega's confidence level? Is he going to try to shoot for a takedown to get them into his professional realm, which he's one of the greatest Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specialists in mixed martial arts, and he's shown so many guillotine chokes, and just fighting off of his back has one of the greatest reputations you can earn in the MMA space. Brian Ortega is an A+ BJJ stylist, but his stand-up, while improving over his career, was kind of in question when he fought the Korean Zombie in his last fight, October 2020, and he just put on a clinic against Korean Zombie. He made him look a couple years more inexperienced. Remember, I was saying Korean Zombie's gotten a lot better in the stand-up, a lot more technical. Well, he got outclassed by Ortega, and yes, the Zombie acknowledged that he got really hurt early in the fight and never really got his bearings back, so that might be worth considering. But Brian Ortega just looked like he had done a ton of work, technical work in training between his fight, his disaster loss against Max Holloway, and this fight against the Korean Zombie. Now, before that, Ortega was, winning his fights, early fights in the UFC against lesser competition, and then he fought Clay Guida, who was actually beating him for about 2 rounds and 4 minutes of a 3-round fight. So for 90% of the fight already in the books, if they went to a scorecard, I think I would have had Clay Guida probably winning 2-1 or something. But then Ortega pulled off a beautiful knee after just kind of working him over. He was going for broke in that third round. Ortega had his foot on the gas, probably realized, damn, I can't leave anything to chance here. I might be down in this fight. Mounted a comeback and ended up stopping a super game and overachieving in this fight, because Clay Guida had a long career by this point. Even though this fight was back in 2016, Guida was about as veteran as it gets, just in terms of the amount of fights against elite fighters you can endure. But Guida fought Ortega great until that last minute when he was wearing out in the third round, and then he got stopped by a knee against Ortega, who came on strong. The next fight for Ortega was against Renato Moicano, who was a surging prospect for some time, and was a surging prospect even after that fight, until I would say probably when Jose Aldo stopped Moicano. That's probably where this guy's really, really something. I mean, it's not too late for the guy, but he's had a couple setbacks since. Now, Ortega versus Moicano, again, this was a very, very even fight. Moicano in the stand-up was given as well as he was getting. And in some of these Ortega fights, like the one against Guida, the commentators are asking, when is Ortega going to try to go for the takedown, try to bring this to the floor, back into his realm, since he is kind of struggling in the stand-up because, again, he's improving, but he's not elite yet in the stand-up. So same thing with Moicano. They were just pasting each other. This turned into like a stand-up battle of attrition, not too different from like Usman versus Covington in their first fight. Well, in the last round, Renato Moicano tried to go for the takedown, got the takedown, but in doing so, he basically gave Ortega, who, again, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specialist, he gave him his neck. Ortega made quick work and put him in a guillotine off the back. And this was after, again, Moicano initiated the takedown because he was starting to get pasted up a little bit more. Momentum was swinging in Ortega's way. He had kind of hurt Moicano a couple times, but again, Moicano timed the shot pretty well, but Ortega's too instinctive on knowing, hey, got you, too late, fight's over, submission. In fact, his very next fight, Ortega's, was a second round submission against Cub Swanson. So by this time, he's surging. And then he fights former lightweight 155-pound champion Frankie Edgar. And that's the fight where he catches Edgar with a beautiful left uppercut in the first round. And this uppercut from Brian Ortega is something that he looks for pretty frequently. Like, if you dip your head, he even caught threw it at Max a few times. If you start to slide into position against Ortega and you have your head a little too low, he is very quick at just planting that back foot, and he switches stances. So the uppercut can often come as a left-handed lead uppercut from a southpaw stance, or he could throw the right uppercut from the orthodox stance. But yeah, he throws him. He's got a hair trigger left uppercut, and he caught Frankie Edgar with that. And he was looking for it against Guida a few times. It kind of grazed him with it a couple times. Didn't drop Guida with it, but he did stagger him once. So that's one thing I'm going to be looking for with Volkanovski and Ortega. Volkanovski's going to have to be careful, and I'm sure he's aware that Ortega's got this deadly uppercut that he could throw, again, from either stance. And he switches stances pretty fluidly. Well, that knockout win against Edgar gave Ortega the title shot against Max Holloway. Again, it ended up being a disaster. Ortega was competitive for like the first round and then some of the second round. He even mounted a bit of a comeback and a rally in the third round, but by the end of the fourth round, just too many punches. Max, in his reach and his volume and his timing, it was just another league of striking. And at certain points in this fight, Ortega looked like he was surrounded by Max Holloway. It was not pretty. And then he had his comeback fight against the Korean Zombie, where he looked like a new guy. He looked like he was rejuvenated, refreshed, went to the drawing board, came back out, pitched not a perfect game, but a shutout, not a no-hitter, but a shutout against the Korean Zombie. So what do I expect between Volkanovski and Brian Ortega? One, Volkanovski's not the Korean Zombie when it comes to movement around the cage. Like, Volkanovski, like I said, is as sophisticated as they come in level changing, feinting, timing the leg kicks. If you're too front foot heavy in your approach, which this is another thing I worry about for Ortega, is if you are front foot heavy, he will destroy your lead leg with well-timed calf kicks and even front kicks to the front of the to the shin area, which is nasty. That's just cruel. But Volkanovski's got great timed kicks, which he deployed with impunity in that first fight against Max Holloway. Holloway made some great adjustments in the second fight, still took a lot of damage to the leg, but not like he did in the first fight against Volkanovski. So I look for Ortega's, where's he placing his feet, and how often is he going to be switching stances, because Volkanovski is not the guy to experiment against. Like, Volkanovski knows his game like this. You feel like he could roll out of bed or be in a half comatose state and be able to fire off with these well-timed strikes and feints and everything that goes into his game. He's like a 5'6" version of the 6'4" Adesanya, and different. He's a little bit more Pacquiao-like in the way that he moves in and out, but he keeps his lead hand out there. He has a deceptively long reach. Like, Ortega has, I believe, like a 69-inch reach at 5'9", and as short as Volkanovski is at 5'6", the dude's got a 71-inch reach, like 71 and a half or something like that. He basically has at 5'6" what boxer Errol Spence has at like 5'10". So he's got a deceptively long reach. Put it like this. Floyd Mayweather, like Errol Spence, have a 72-inch reach. Volkanovski, as crouched and low as he is, 71-inch reach. He had the reach advantage against Max Holloway. Think about that. Now, Max Holloway is a lot taller, so reach means something when you've got the higher shoulders and you're punching downward because of the angles. But again, on paper, Volkanovski has a longer reach than Max Holloway, who just looks like Jack Skellington with the way that his body type is shaped. So that's something to consider. Do not think because Ortega is 5'9" and Volkanovski's 5'6" that Volkanovski won't be able to find Ortega with the jab, for instance. I expect him to be touching Ortega up with the jab, and he's got a slick one. DC commented on the slickness of Volkanovski's jab in that fight against Chad Mendes. Now, again, Chad Mendes is eye-to-eye with Volkanovski, so there's going to be a different dynamic, but we've seen how Volkanovski operates versus a taller fighter whose legs aren't as quick as his. Now, Max does have really good boxing footwork and MMA, Muay Thai style footwork. And Brian Ortega, to his credit, has developing, improving boxing style footwork, but it's not going to be like Volkanovski's, and I expect that to be on display here. I do think Ortega's going to have his moments. I think that he might even drop Volkanovski, who has been dropped in multiple fights. I believe Darren Elkins and Chad Mendes at different points dropped Volkanovski, as did Max Holloway in their rematch. So you can't think and drop Volkanovski. He does get hurt. But again, there's this ruggedness and this hardness to, like, he almost like says, yeah, like when he gets dropped, and then he just and then he'll throw like a front kick where his shin clashes with your shin, like think, like one of those very painful things, just to show that he's willing to, as Dustin Poirier put it after his third fight versus Conor McGregor, suffer in the cage. Volkanovski's willing to suffer. He just seems like a hard dude. And Ortega is as well. Ortega, I mean, you don't get through that fourth round against Max Holloway in the shape that Ortega was in without having the mental toughness and intestinal fortitude to do so. So both hard dudes, but I think that Volkanovski's going to punish Ortega. I do expect Ortega, again, to catch Volkanovski being the shorter fighter who's going to be advancing in different moments, and Ortega, I expect to be looking to time him in some of these moments. I think that he's going to hurt Volkanovski and probably win at least one round, but I do think Volkanovski's going to end up out-schooling Ortega at some point where by the third or fourth round, I expect Volkanovski to basically be up 3-1 after 4 rounds. That's what I expect here. And maybe Ortega mounts a comeback in the 5th or does something to drop him maybe again to where he wins 2 rounds, but emphatically to where there's an argument on did he maybe win a 3rd round. But the problem here is that Ortega's like bread and butter is still his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. As well as he's developing in the stand-up, he's still a Jiu-Jitsu specialist. And yes, there's a chance that he could submit Volkanovski, but I think that it's more likely that he has trouble finding takedown opportunities because of Volkanovski's footwork and movement. And every time that I've seen Volkanovski taken down, whether it's against Chad Mendes or against Darren Elkins, he usually scrambles so well to where within short time, he's in control of the situation, either with the reversal or being able to, to get his underhooks in and create separation, push you, and then we're back in the stand-up. Volkanovski, it might not be the experienced specialist that Ortega is, or the wrestler that some of these wrestlers with wrestling pedigrees are, but he's not a novice when it comes to MMA grappling. He knows how to navigate those waters. So I don't think that unless Ortega slips in something very slick and sudden with a nice setup, I don't think that he's going to be able to take Volkanovski down, keep him down, and start working for submissions. I don't think that that's going to happen here. Instead, I think that it's going to be 90%, 80, 90% fought in the stand-up between these two. And I think Volkanovski is going to win something like 4 rounds to 1 or maybe 3 rounds to 2. I don't think it's going to be a split decision type of fight. I think it's going to be unanimous decision for Alexander Volkanovski. But yeah, I can't wait. And I just want to see how Ortega responds to the challenges that Volkanovski presents. Because again, I think that Ortega is going to get some combinations off. This is not going to be an easy walk in the park. It's not going to be an easy outclassing. It's not going to be like a total schooling. But I think that it's going to be close, competitive, but clear rounds for Volkanovski. But yeah, I just hope for Ortega's sake that this doesn't turn into Max Holloway versus Ortega 2. I don't think it's going to necessarily be that. I think Volkanovski's a harder hitter than Max, but he just doesn't have the same volume. And it was the volume that was overwhelming Ortega in that case. But we'll see. I mean, if Volkanovski does stop Ortega, damn, that would be a huge feather in his cap, man. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.